I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this shit.
You thought the shark was scary. Wait until you hear what happened behind the camera. From exploding sets to mutinying crews, these are the secrets even fans of Jaws never saw coming. Fact 1. The production used a full-scale mechanical shark, famously named Bruce, after Spielberg's lawyer. But Bruce became the film's biggest problem. He was built to work in fresh water tanks, not salt water. Once lowered into the Atlantic off Martha's Vineyard, the salt corroded his gears and ruined the electronics. The shark would frequently sink, stall, or float awkwardly. Each failure delayed filming by hours, sometimes days. Crews had to haul Bruce out of the water and drain him like a broken submarine. He malfunctioned so often that Spielberg had to rethink how to shoot the movie. That's why you barely see the shark in the first half of the film. The tension was a creative response to a mechanical disaster. Spielberg later said, "The shark not working was a godsend." By keeping the creature off screen, fear came from the unknown. Bruce was operated by 3 different teams, one for each movement axis. They had no way to test him fully before shooting. At one point, the hydraulic platform tore through the shark's skin on camera. It cost over $250,000 to build Bruce, a huge part of the film's $9 million budget. Spielberg became so frustrated, he began referring to Bruce as the Great White Turd. Scenes had to be rewritten constantly around the shark's failures. But in the end, Bruce's absence made the film iconic. The monster we couldn't see became the scariest of all, and that accident turned into cinematic genius. Fact 2. Steven Spielberg was just 27 years old when he directed Jaws. He had never made a blockbuster before and was under enormous pressure. As production dragged on, going over budget and over schedule, he started to panic. Crew members were losing faith and studio executives were furious. Spielberg was convinced the film would bomb or never get finished at all. He refused to be on set for the final shot of the movie. That's right, he wasn't even there when they filmed the shark's final explosion. He left the night before, fearing that if he stuck around, the crew would throw him in the water as a prank. He watched the final dailies from Los Angeles instead. The explosion was achieved using a real underwater charge and compressed air canisters. It took multiple takes to get it right, and the noise shook the dock. Spielberg's absence was unusual for a director, but symbolic of the chaos. Despite the fear, that final scene became legendary. It's now one of the most satisfying endings in movie history. Spielberg later said walking away was one of the smartest decisions he made. He knew the film would be his make-or-break moment, and it almost broke him. His doubts didn't show on screen, but they were real. Years later, he returned to Martha's Vineyard for a documentary and visited the spot. He stood quietly and said, "I should have stayed." But maybe that exit, just like the shark, added mystery. Fact 3. The screenplay for Jaws was in constant flux throughout filming. Originally adapted from Peter Benchley's novel, the script went through major overhauls. Benchley himself wrote the first drafts, but Spielberg found them too dark and cynical. He brought in Carl Gottlieb, who had a background in comedy writing. Gottlieb worked without a completed script, reworking scenes on the fly. Many lines of dialogue were improvised or rewritten the night before filming. The beach scenes had pages rewritten on location while extras waited. Even character arcs changed mid-production, especially Hooper's. In the book, Hooper has an affair with Brody's wife and is killed by the shark. Spielberg scrapped both subplots to make the story more heroic. Gottlieb slept in a trailer near set so he could update pages in real time. Some scenes, like the dinner table moment between Brody and his son, were unscripted. Spielberg let the actors play freely, then kept what felt natural. The chaos reflected the pressure of making a film at sea. No one had time to stop. They just adapted. Lines like, "We're gonna need a bigger boat," were ad-libbed by Roy Shider. and they made it into the final cut because they were better than what was written. The final script was never finished. It was discovered, piece by piece in the water, and somehow it all came together, just like a puzzle with waves crashing over the edges. Fact 4. Before Roy Shider was cast, the role of Chief Martin Brody was offered to several other actors. Charlton Heston lobbied hard for the part, but Spielberg didn't want a big star. He feared Heston's presence would make the shark feel less threatening. Producers considered Robert Duvall, who turned it down, and even Gene Hackman. Shider landed the part after attending a party where Spielberg was talking about the film. He overheard the concept and asked to read the script. Spielberg liked his grounded, everyman energy. Shider had starred in The French Connection, but wasn't yet a household name. He brought authenticity and quiet strength to the role. During filming, he clashed with Richard Drifus at times. Their tension added to the on-screen chemistry. Shider famously improvised the line, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," which became the film's most iconic quote. He was terrified of water, but kept it to himself during shooting. Brody's fear of the ocean was a character trait, but it mirrored Shider's real anxiety. He once said the hardest scene to shoot was when he's chumming and the shark appears. That shot was a genuine reaction of surprise and terror. Shider wasn't Spielberg's first choice, but he became indispensable. His performance grounded the story and gave it emotional weight. He didn't play a hero. He played a man trying not to break, and that made him unforgettable. Sometimes the right actor just happens to walk into the right room and stay for the shark. Fact 5. Richard Drifus initially declined the role of Hooper when it was first offered. He felt the script wasn't finished and didn't trust a movie about a rubber shark. After finishing another project, he saw himself on screen and hated his own performance. Convinced his career was slipping, he called his agent and begged to take Jaws. Luckily, the role was still open, and he joined just before production began. Drifus brought a sarcastic, intellectual energy that wasn't in the original character. He added humor, tension, and unexpected depth to Hooper. His chemistry with Robert Shaw, Quint, became a cornerstone of the film. The two actors clashed off-screen, often arguing between takes. Spielberg let that tension bleed into their performances. Drifus has since said working on Jaws was one of the most difficult shoots of his life. He almost drowned during one of the shark cage scenes. The real shark footage used in that sequence was filmed separately in Australia with a smaller stuntman. The size difference made the shark look even bigger. When Drifus saw the finished film, he realized what they had created. He went from skeptic to superfan almost overnight. He later admitted, "I was an idiot to doubt it." Hooper became one of his most beloved roles, and the man who almost walked away helped make movie history. Sometimes fear is the sign you're about to do something great, even if it swims up out of the dark. Fact 6.
$10,000 from me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Robert Shaw, who played the grizzled shark hunter Quint, was known for his intense performance and his heavy drinking. Shaw was a brilliant actor but struggled with alcoholism throughout the shoot. Many of his most famous lines were delivered while he was either drunk or recovering from being drunk. Spielberg tried to manage Shaw's schedule around his drinking, often filming easier takes in the morning. During the iconic Indianapolis monologue scene, Shaw was so drunk he couldn't remember his lines. He begged Spielberg for another chance the next day, and nailed it in one take. That final version is the one in the film. Co-stars Richard Drifus and Roy Shider were often frustrated by Shaw's unpredictable behavior. At one point, Drifus refused to speak to Shaw between takes. Despite their tension, Spielberg later said it actually helped their characters' dynamic. Shaw's real-life intensity bled into Quint's obsession. His monologue about the USS Indianapolis was partially written by Shaw himself. He rewrote lines the night before and made them his own. The performance is now regarded as one of the greatest in movie history. But behind the scenes, it was chaos. Shaw's drinking once led to a delay that cost thousands in reshoots. Still, his portrayal was so raw and visceral that it couldn't be duplicated. Spielberg called him a nightmare and a genius rolled into one. No one else could have played Quint with the same mad poetry. And somehow, through all the turbulence, he delivered a performance that will never sink. Fact 7. Production on Jaws began before the mechanical shark was even completed. The script was in flux, the weather was unpredictable, and the most important prop wasn't ready. Spielberg had to start filming land-based scenes while Bruce the Shark was still being assembled. Engineers worked day and night in Los Angeles while the crew waited in Martha's Vineyard. When the shark finally arrived, it wasn't waterproof. The salt water short-circuited wires and froze hydraulic joints. Spielberg was forced to create suspense without showing the monster. This led to some of the film's most genius moments, like the floating barrels and underwater POV shots. These choices came out of necessity, not design. Bruce's absence forced the story to rely on fear of the unknown. And it worked. Audiences were more terrified by what they imagined than what they saw. The film became a masterclass in restraint. What was meant to be a summer monster movie became a Hitchcock-level thriller. Cinematographer Bill Butler had to find new ways to build tension with lighting and sound. Even John Williams' now famous score filled the gap where Bruce failed. Williams initially played the theme as a joke. Spielberg thought it was too simple until he saw it with footage. That simple two-note motif became cinematic legend. Bruce didn't work, but Spielberg did. And sometimes broken tools force you to make better art. Fact 8.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
The most quoted line in the movie, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," was completely improvised. Roy Shider made it up during filming and delivered it offhandedly. The line was an inside joke among the crew. The production had outgrown its support boats, and everyone kept joking that they needed a bigger boat. Shider worked it into the scene during a take, and it landed perfectly. Spielberg laughed, then decided to keep it in. It came during the first full reveal of the shark, a moment already loaded with shock. Shider's delivery was so calm and dry that it cut the tension just right. Audiences erupted when they heard it in theaters. It became an instant catchphrase and is now listed among the greatest movie quotes of all time. The American Film Institute ranked it number 35 in their 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes list. Shider didn't plan it, he just reacted like anyone else would. Spielberg said that's why it worked so well. It wasn't acting, it was instinct. The crew tried to recapture the same magic in other scenes, but lightning didn't strike twice. No other line stuck like that one, and it's still printed on t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even boats today. One throwaway line became legend, and it was never even typed. Fact 9. Filming Jaws on the open ocean was one of the riskiest decisions Spielberg ever made. Most studios would have used water tanks or green screens, but Spielberg insisted on real water and paid the price. Waves made lighting setups nearly impossible. Cameras had to be sealed in watertight housings and anchored to bobbing platforms. Actors got seasick and crew members quit. Boats drifted out of frame or collided mid-shot. One camera sank to the bottom of the ocean during a key take. The film's production days tripled from the original estimate. Spielberg later called it his film school and nightmare rolled into one. The script was rewritten daily to adjust for weather delays. One storm shut down the set for an entire week. Still, Spielberg stuck with his vision. He believed that the realism of the ocean would elevate the fear, and it did. The ocean became a character, unpredictable, merciless, and vast. Few films have ever attempted that again, because once is enough to learn how quickly water eats time. Fact 10. Before Jaws, summer was considered the worst time to release a movie. Studios reserved their prestige films for the fall and winter. But Universal had low expectations for Jaws and released it in June 1975. What happened next changed cinema forever. The film opened in just 464 theaters, then quickly expanded. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. It became the first movie to gross over $100 million. Audiences lined up around the block, in the heat for weeks. This had never happened before. Universal realized they had a new model on their hands. Wide release plus aggressive marketing plus early summer equals money. Studios took notice, and summer blockbusters were born. Star Wars followed in 1977 using the same strategy. Spielberg didn't plan to create a new business model. He just wanted people to fear the water. The combination of suspense, spectacle, and accessibility created a blueprint still used today. Jaws didn't just eat box office records, it rewrote them. And every summer blockbuster since owes it a debt. From Jurassic Park to The Dark Knight, it all started with one angry fish. Bonus fact: the very first test screening of Jaws took place at a small theater in Dallas, Texas. It wasn't a finished cut. The shark effects were still rough, and music wasn't fully mixed. But when the scene where the shark bursts out of the hull during Hooper's dive played, the crowd went wild. People screamed, spilled popcorn, and one woman even reportedly ran out of the theater. Steven Spielberg was in the back row watching and knew right then the film had something special. He later said that single moment, the surprise shark jump scare, was his favorite audience reaction of all time. The test audience jumped so high, it ruined the next line of dialogue because no one could hear it. Spielberg delayed the release briefly to tweak sound and pacing based on that screening. He added a few extra frames of silence before major jump scares to maximize impact. The reactions were so intense that the studio immediately ramped up its release strategy. They began preparing a wide release, something rarely done at the time. That single test screening helped launch Jaws as the first summer blockbuster. Spielberg called it the scariest focus group I've ever seen. The shark was barely on screen, but the tension worked. Even without polished effects, the fear was real. Viewers left the theater shaken and telling their friends. Word of mouth exploded almost instantly. It wasn't just a movie anymore. It was a phenomenon. And it all started with a room full of strangers jumping in unison.